You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, my name is Philip Heitzen, and today is Friday, April 25th, 2025.
6.
During times of supply chain instability, strong procurement leadership and strategic insight are needed more than ever. But we don't need new approaches, we just need to update our understanding of the macro environment. Core strategic sourcing executed well can help procurement shine in disrupted times, even when the company's focus or objectives are completely different. But it has to be truly strategic, not just based on a checklist or rote processes. To explore this idea further, Adam Collins from ESCA will be joining us for an AOP live session on June the 10th. We'll talk about just this, how procurement has prepared for this high-stakes moment of complexity for a long time without even knowing it. Now you can register for this webinar and any Art of Procurement event by going to artofprocurement.com/calendar.
5.
Tariffs are perhaps the biggest news story of the year so far, and they've sent global supply chains and markets into a tailspin. But as Richik Maitra, director of Alex Partners, recently explained to me in an Art of Procurement podcast episode, now is not the time for procurement to panic. Flying into crisis mode every time a new headline on tariffs is published doesn't do procurement or the business any good. Instead, procurement should make a thoughtful, measured tariff response plan that takes into account both the short and long-term impacts of potential tariffs. In this short clip, Rychik shares a specific framework that procurement can use to understand how to form an appropriate response to tariffs. Let's listen. I'd love to talk more about kind of how do we respond to tariffs. You talked a little bit there about short-term versus long-term, but when you start to think about, okay, I'm now getting the impact of tariffs, how do I think about my strategies to mitigate those? Are there specific, like a process or a framework that you kind of go through at the beginning to say, okay, this helps me understand what my course of action would be? I'd love to know some advice on that you would give on the first thing you do when you get another request that's based on tariff. Like, how do we deal with this?
Right. So, like I mentioned, the framework would be to think about what are the short-term actions you can take to reduce the duties that you pay. So what we call duty engineering. Mm-hmm. It sounds complicated, but essentially the principle behind that is, can we make some small changes to my supply chain or how I account for things in my supply chain that reduces either the dutiable value or the duty rate that I pay. An example could be the HTS code under which you are classifying products being imported. Are they the right ones? Are they the ones that have been fitted more generally, or are there codes which are more specific, which your products could fall into and attract a lower rate of duty? There are thousands and thousands of codes. So, and
do you find that is? I hesitate in using the word low-hanging fruit, but the opportunity there is not insignificant. That there is a lot of perhaps incorrect coding, but it didn't really matter before. And so you see opportunity in recoding.
It is quite an opportunity. And there are good reasons for that. There are very large organizations which have big departments who actually do this. They work with the lawyers and they brought it to a optimized state.
Yeah.
But many medium to small organizations may not have those resources and may not have done that. So now's the time to look at it. There could be opportunity there. The other things that one could look at is, am I, buying a product which I could buy in a different form? Mm-hmm. So semi-assembled or, more assembled in a place where there are lower tariffs. I'll give you an example. If more than 55% of the value of the product has been put together in a country with which there is a free trade agreement, then even regardless of where the inputs are coming from, the final product will be classified as free trade. So, if I do have one of those countries in my supply chain, but I'm not doing enough of my value addition there, it may be easy in a relatively short, period of months to be able to make those adjustments. So to, make sure that you're not being hit with tariffs on the input products.
4.
Services spend is such an important part of procurement strategy. The point that recent economic impact research revealed that 66% of companies spend between 5 and 15% of their revenue on services alone. But as processes mature and technology evolves, procurement faces new opportunities and challenges in managing this critical spend category. My partner Kelly Barner recently spoke with Gordon Donovan, the Vice President of Research for Procurement and External Workforce at SAP, to discuss the latest findings from our updated survey research on services spend management. The insights from the survey spoke volumes. We learned that procurement's impact is rooted in collaboration, that consistency is just as important as having the right platform, and that even though our approach to services spend has improved, there is still plenty of room to grow and mature. And staying on theme, with the other segments this week, adjusting our approach to services spend can provide greater value to the business, even during challenging economic times.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
When you work in strategic sourcing, there's really nothing quite like that feeling you get when a contract is finally signed. Months of preparation, back and forth, negotiations, and legal review all come together in what feels like a moment of triumph for procurement. But that signature is only the beginning. A signed contract is just a framework of promises between a supplier and the business, and it's up to procurement to then bring that framework to life through deliberate action and strategic implementation. In fact, without a strong implementation process mapped out, procurement risks losing up to half of their negotiated savings post-contract, which clearly takes the wind out of our sails. What does the right implementation process look like? It includes things like executing and integrating the contract into your contract management system, validating your baseline spend data so you can measure the real results, and creating a robust implementation plan with clear communication channels and expectations for everybody. Even when procurement is resource strapped, they can still add tremendous value post-signature by putting simple communication processes in place, like kickoff meetings, milestone check-ins, and in general remaining available and receptive when issues come up, which we know issues always come up. Ultimately, it's about staying engaged and strategic, because supplier relationships and cost savings don't come from contracts alone. They come from the purpose, transparency, and accountability that happens after the ink has dried.
2.
We don't talk too often here about procurement in higher education, in part because most institutions typically don't have robust in-house expertise, and instead leverage GPOs for a lot of their spend. Higher ed is also feeling the crunch from the global trade war and market instabilities, putting schools' procurement teams right into the spotlight, as I recently read in an article from University Business. Now, to start, universities nationwide are implementing hiring freezes and budget cuts in response to all the economic and political volatility. The Department of Education is cutting 50% of its workforce, and the National Institutes of Health plans to cap research cost reimbursement at 15%. So this has created a perfect storm for university finances. To navigate it, universities are looking to procurement to optimize their spending through improved strategies, increased automation, and better supplier negotiations. These changes can't come fast enough for the institutions that are feeling the pressure. And since there doesn't seem to be an immediate end in sight for financial uncertainties and policy fluctuations, advanced procurement technology may prove more important than ever for universities to maintain their commitments to education and research without threatening their long-term financial stability.
1.
Now, it's hard to believe that we're less than 2 weeks away from Catalyst LA, Art of Procurement's first ever in-person executive event. The interest in the event we've seen from the procurement community has been really overwhelming, and I'm happy to say we only now have a limited number of practitioner tickets left. We've intentionally limited attendance at these events because our purpose is to create a really intimate, high-impact experience where procurement leaders can have meaningful peer-to-peer discussions about the future of procurement's operating model. The agenda includes expert-led roundtables and mastermind sessions, all specifically designed to create an environment of collaboration and knowledge sharing. It's an approach that just isn't possible in larger conference settings. And most importantly, we want all the attendees to leave the event with some actionable recommendations they can take back to their teams and implement straight away. I'm looking forward to all of the rich discussions and valuable connections that will come out of this one-in-a-kind event. And if you haven't got your ticket yet, you can learn more just by going to artofprocurement.com/catalyst. That's artofprocurement.com/catalyst. And we look forward to seeing you in LA in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.